I think what you're doing there is really important. I think what I'm doing is really important. It's bigger than us. I think this is actually kind of a new revolution going on. So, okay, everybody, welcome to this video. I've got Rob here from the United States of America. I don't know if you want to get more specific than that, Rob.
Yeah, I'm from Indiana. How are
Okay.
you?
I'm great. Great. How are you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. So
Yeah.
stoked to be here today.
So where I'm in Canada, of course, Victoria. So the theme of this whole chat is getting to know Coheed and Cambria. And I've reacted to only one song in Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. And that got about 15,000 hits, actually. I'll put the link to it up there. So that was about a year ago, and I actually haven't reacted to any more. And the one surprising thing about this channel is reacting to all this, to me, new progressive rock and progressive metal is how much there is. It's just an incredible, almost overwhelming. I mean, there are easily 150 bands that I am trying to catch up with. I thought we'd do this video, get to know Rob here, who is I guess you're a pretty dedicated fan of Coheed, would you say?
Yeah, I run the All Things Coheed podcast. We've interviewed the band. We are just, always, ear to the ground as far as what's happening in the Coheed world. Been a huge fan for years,
Oh,
years and years.
that's great. Well, I'll make sure we'll put a link down below to this podcast of yours because I haven't heard it, so I'll have to check that out too. So tell me a little about this podcast. Why did you start the podcast?
So, the big thing about Coheed and Cambria is that it isn't as accessible when people start talking about the music because there's so much story. People when they talk about Coheed, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, "Oh, there's comic books," or they have so many albums that span the past 20 years. It's hard to know when to get in or how to get in. And our idea was we wanted to make it more accessible for people who weren't super familiar, where we're sitting and talking back and forth about the band's history, showing, hey, they started here. This is what they did after that. Their first record label was Equal Vision, kind of give people a more condensed view without having to buy DVDs or do their own research in a really condensed format. And it's been very fulfilling on my end to be able to sit down and speak with people who are like just as into them as I am. It's kind of a good echo chamber in that way to be like, oh, you love that song. Oh, I love that song too. There's a lot of camaraderie in the community, and it's a great one to be a part of, to be completely honest.
That's great. Well, I'm going to have to check it out for sure now that I know about it. And how did it sort of end up that you were kind of spearheading this, or was some other friends that you
Oh
decided to
yeah,
do?
I begged. I was just a big fan. I've been a big fan for years. So this was like, I don't know, this was like 2018, something like that. And I said, okay, I'm going to look at the biggest members of this community, and I don't know them. I'm just going to ask them if they want to do something. And surprisingly, they did. We sat down, recorded a couple episodes, and realized we were having so much fun in between seeing other fans at tours. We just kept doing it. And that's, we decided that if we ever stopped having fun, we'd stop doing it. And we haven't stopped yet.
What's your sort of, they call it an elevator conversation, like you've got, you're just meeting someone on an elevator, you got a Coheed and Cambria t-shirt or something. I say, oh, who's that band? What's your nutshell explanation of this group?
My nutshell explanation is it's pop music for metal nerds. It's like
Hmm.
the antithesis of how deep and convoluted some genres can be. This is something that the music sounds poppy. It sounds different than the rest you hear from the scene. You listen to other post-hardcore bands, it's deep and dark, or like emo bands are just this is very true about my life. But there's something so relatable about Coheed as a band
Mhm.
that once you hear one or two songs, you're like, oh, I obviously see why people love this.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my elevator pitch. And personally, they remind me a lot of older bands, even though their sound doesn't sound exactly like the Beach Boys. There is kind of like a Pet Soundsy aspect to their albums being conceptual. They're trying out different genres. They're going through different phases. Like you listen to Abbey Road, and there are songs that sound entirely different from each other but fit perfectly on that album as far as like the Beatles go, and they dabble so much in genre. You listen to Coheed's first album and you compare it against their fourth, and it sounds like it's an entirely different band.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
there's a lot of variety in their music.
And the Deer Hunter's like that too. I found in all the reacts I've had, extremely varied, and they seem to have a they know all these genres so intimately that they can reproduce different genres and sort of blend them. And that's something I think is kind of newer. I think that's something that's a more modern a modern thing. Like this is like growing up in the 70s and 80s when I was pretty young and getting into music. There wasn't really that kind of genre blending so much, except for progressive music, which was probably the exception. So, have you seen Coheed and Cambria live?
I've been to quite a few shows. My first shows I started going to after I started doing the podcast. But I've been to every tour except for this most recent one. And every time they put on one hell of a show. It
That's
is it is amazing. It's like being transported in time. You lose an hour while you're there. You're like, I had no idea they just played 14 songs. What just happened? They're showmen. Seriously, it is one of the best live shows out there today.
cool. I should react to some of their live if they have some live videos on YouTube. I'd like to do that. I haven't seen them
They
live.
The craziest thing about it, back in I think it was 2012-ish, they released Neverender, where basically they had 4 albums out at that point. They played all of their albums front to back over 4 nights, recorded it, and it's on a DVD. So every song they had released from their first 4 albums is live in one form or another. But yeah, their live shows, they have a couple live performance DVDs, which you don't see too much nowadays. But they have them and they're very, very good.
Huh.
You said you were a big fan of like 60s, 70s, right? Like that's kind of music you grew up with in your head?
Well, yeah, I was born in 1968, so I lived through the 70s. I was into music starting in 1972, like really intensely into the Beatles. Unlike most children who, would casually be interested in music, I was sitting in front of my record player literally for 2 hours straight, just listening to the record over and over and rocking on the couch to it, sucking my thumb or whatever. So I've really absorbed a lot of music since the early 70s. So I really feel like kind of privileged in a way that I've witnessed the evolution of music, and it's very ironic too that I kind of lost interest in prog rock in the 90s because of the harder edged sound of the guitars. I was more or less, I mean, heavy metal to me like would be Eddie Van Halen. That was the hardest that I could enjoy, hard like Eddie Van Halen guitar. And then to me, like for example, Dream Theater, it seemed even beyond that. There was even a harder edge to it, and it took me basically 30 years to come around to enjoying that. So that's one of the things that's held me back from enjoying a lot of the more modern music. So
I bring that up just because when I was younger, I'm 28 years old, so I'm fairly young. But I didn't grow up in that era, but that era was all around me when I grew up. I was really obsessed with The Who. I loved their singles, like you hear on the radio all the time. And I was browsing the TV one day and I saw this movie that I had not heard of before. And it was called Tommy. And I saw that Roger Daltrey was in this movie. I'm like, what is this thing? And that was my gateway drug into like conceptual music. And through that, the passion in writing, like you listen to songs like Go to the Mirror and things like that, you have this big visceral emotional reaction to that. When you listen to Coheed and Cambria or like the Deer Hunter, for example, they have the same kind of songwriting style where the Who was writing songs like extra extra read all about it. It's like this whole like they're playing up the vaudeville aspect of that, even though that's not their genre. They're doing it for the sake of the story. The Deer Hunter does the same thing with Mr. Usher on His Way to Town is a jazz song in the middle of this album that is not jazz. Or the Coheed and Cambria does the exact same thing where they have a really Broadway-esque song in the form of Goodnight Fair Lady on the Afterman, and it sounds nothing like the rest of the album, but it serves the story. And so I connect
Hmm.
these 3 bands in that way. especially for me because I love the Who. Okay, I do. Um, but you don't hear music like that anymore. You don't hear people putting in the effort of saying, here's an emotional, they're emo bands, but they're emo to the point of I'm telling a story that's very emotional rather than I'm expressing my personal emotional feelings. So I think that there's that disconnect. You don't get a lot of those bands these days.
Mm. Well, I think a lot of it is the music business itself, because in the 70s, a record label was a guy who had a big record collection and said, "Oh, I want to be a record executive." So he goes into the business of records, and he understands that bands need to germinate. They need to. I mean, it was typical for any band back then to have at least 3 albums before you expect traction to really occur, where usually the third album, suddenly something catches, the audience grows, suddenly there's a hit or something, and then the band just snowballs from there. And there is a real nurturing of music, whereas nowadays the music business has moved more toward basically they let the band do everything on their own, build their own audience, release their own releases, and when they get to a certain stage that's bigger, then they'll be interested, then they might get involved. But that's not easy to accomplish on your own independently, to nurture yourself. I mean, we've all got rents to pay. We've got, whereas when you were signed with a label back then, it was sort of like a dream to come true, because basically it's like, okay, now all you focus on is your music, the band and the music. That's it. Just nothing else. Just focus, focus, focus. I'm really excited to learn about Cambria, for example, because tell me how have they evolved through from start to present?
You've got a definite punk sound on their first album. They're kids, they're running around, they're going to different clubs under different names. They were known as Toxic Parents, they were known as Beautiful Loser. They're going around, they're picking up band members as they make their way, but eventually they get on the core four, which happened to be Claudio Sanchez, Travis Stever, Nate Kelly at the time, and wow, I'm blanking on names. Michael Todd. And so they get the core four. Their name is Shabuti, based on a movie they had seen where they were chanting, and they thought it was a great name. But after they got signed on the label, they had to change it to something that wasn't derived from a movie. So they went with Coheed and Cambria, which was a story that Claudio had been working on. They start playing music. They have EPs come out. And here's the thing. This is the thing that's insane. In a DVD interview with one of the members of the label they were signed to, which was Evil Inc. Or not, sorry, not Evil Inc. It was Equal Vision Records. Equal Vision Records, there was a representative that called them and said, "Hey, how's it going out there on the road?" They said, "Well, we had a show. There was like 70 people there, but we sold like 50 CDs. Is that good?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's impossible. That's really good." So people are buying them in droves. They stay at like a relative amount of success. They released 2 albums, Second Stage, Turbine Blade, In Keeping Secrets. You heard the first track off of that in your reaction. But then they release Good Apollo and Burning Star 4, and that is their third album. They get a track on Rock Band, and they start selling like hotcakes. They're at Vans Warped Tour in 2007, and there is a huge cult following. It goes from the point where Coheed was supporting bands to Coheed's now headlining, and very popular people are supporting them. Most recently you had Mastodon touring with them, and like they had Taking Back Sunday doing a dual headliner. But yeah, it's just insane. Their growth is astronomical, and their fans aren't just fans. I barely know a passive Coheed fan. People are either 2 feet in. No one is 1 foot in, 1 foot out with Coheed. It's just head first. And as far as music and everything, there's a lot of debate. People look at Coheed's albums as their children. There are some that might not be the best, but they love them all. So personally, if you ever do decide to do an album review, personally, Good Apollo on Burning Star 4 Part 1 would be the way to go. It is, when people think of Coheed, that's the album they think of. If you do want to delve into something a little bit more out there, a little bit more experimental, different, but good, Their most recent album, Vaxis Act 2, is the Who's Tommy. It is it's highly influenced by the Who's Tommy, which I highly recommend all their albums personally. But those two I would keep in mind.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to jot those down for doing that. And so the thing too, I've noticed in doing all these reacts for the last couple of years, sometimes I'm influenced by the reaction of the audience. Like if I get a huge reaction, I'll go back to that band. But I found that sometimes I rebel against that. Sometimes I don't care if I got big hits. It's like I don't want to react to another of that band or whatever. So I like to go by intuition a lot, just because this channel is also about me exploring and what I feel like I want to explore. So I've noticed generally it's usually after 3 reacts of the same band. That's usually the point where I feel like jumping off and getting their albums and stuff. Even if I loved the first one, it's kind of interesting. It's usually about 3. So so for me, I haven't been bitten yet by the Cambria bug because I've only reacted to one, and so I'm looking forward to exploring more about this band. I do like comic books as well. I've got a pile of comics books that me and the kids are reading and stuff. So that's got me interested too. The aspect of the creative aspect of sort of bigger stories and drawing on concepts and stories, and that's something I'd like to check out. Tell me a little about the comics.
So yeah, the comics are kind of based in it's so hard to explain. It's very sci-fi, extremely sci-fi. It's 78 planets in a triangle formation surrounded by these big stars. That's their symbol of the band. Is this keywork symbol. But essentially at the heart of it all, it's a story about a young boy wanting to rebel against his path that was set in front of him. It's the idea of choice and what that means. Is it better to go along and do the right thing and be, ostracized for it? Or is it better to just do the wrong thing and everyone love you? Those kinds of ideas. It's a really beautiful story in that way, but yeah, there's some superhero elements, there's some robot-y elements with a ton of different races and planet names.
Awesome.
And it's very Star Wars and Rebels versus the Empire essentially.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the comics are beautifully drawn as well. And there's different aspects to it. Like you have the main story, which is the Amory Wars. You have a smaller sub-story that is the Afterman, which is kind of like a scientist going out to basically leaving his real life behind to do this, to have a passion project and realizing what he's lost in doing so. And then you have set in time way after all the events of the Amory Wars is this Vaxis storyline. There's 2 albums so far about it, but they have coffee table books, big, beautiful books that are like almost prose. And then Coheed also has a full prose novel written with Peter David, which is incredible. But yeah, they have a ton of stuff. But here's the thing about Coheed is that it's not about how crazy the lyrics are. There's a meme that gets thrown around in the Coheed community where it's like, you hear a Coheed lyric and it's like, I have departed a God King 7. And you don't know what that means. But when you listen to the music, you just say, well, shit, I have departed a God King 7. Like you feel that emotion, even though you don't understand it. And that's kind of the beauty of it, is you can enjoy it without. It tastes even better with it, but you can definitely enjoy it without. A lot of people do.
Well, you're inspiring me a lot because I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I mean, since I was little, even before Star Wars came out, I was into sci-fi. There wasn't much to choose from. Obviously, before Star Wars, there was Space Odyssey 2001. Which, have you seen that?
Oh yeah, definitely big Kubrick fan. Yeah,
isn't it incredible? I'm watching a film from the late 60s that looks like it could have been made today. I mean, it just has it's incredible.
When Hal pops up on screen, I still get chills, and he's just like, "I'm sorry, Dave," and I'm like, "Oh no, man!"
Fantastic. So, so you're inspiring me about this band. I love science fiction. So, That doesn't scare me away at all. I love sci-fi. Me and my brother, we grew up, we're huge sci-fi fans and into prog and all that. So I mean, progressive rock, I mean, where else are you going to find science fiction in music besides progressive rock and metal? I don't know. I mean, there was one song by calling occupants of interstellar. Do you know this
Oh,
is this is one pop song by this singer? Very rarely they'll delve into sci-fi, but it was sort of like an ABBA song almost. I forget what, calling occupants of interstellar. I
I'll
can't remember.
Google it. Hang on.
Most extraordinary Earth
The Carpenters.
song. The Carpenters. Who would have
Oh,
expected some sci-fi song from the Carpenters?
actually, do you know what's funny about this? There's a side project by the drummer of Coheed and Cambria, Josh Shepard, called Weird Science. He uses a sample from this song in one of his rap tracks because he has a side
Oh,
project.
cool,
But it's really funny that he uses the sample from the song. It's very good.
cool, cool. So as you can see, my albums behind me. I've got a Coheed poster. Hold on, I'll show it to you. Where is it? There it is. This is a Cohabian Cambria poster right there.
That's a hell of a poster right there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It looks like it's for Year of the Black Rainbow, maybe? I don't know what year that is.
It's showing a little album there in
Oh,
stores now. In stores
oh, yep,
now.
that's Year of the Black Rainbow. That is, it's funny because that is the most controversial album Coheed's ever released.
Oh,
But you've
interesting.
got a poster for it. That's great.
Yeah,
That's really great.
I think that's the only one they had. I want to get
Oh man.
I want to try to get sponsored by some poster company. I'm gonna approach them because these posters are not cheap, and I'd love to refresh them, like every month, just change them with new posters. That would be such a
Oh, you
uh
might want to reach out to what is it? There's a thing that does metal posters. They sponsor YouTube channels all the time.
oh, they do.
Oh
Okay,
yeah,
I'll definitely check them out.
I gotta look them up real quick. It's
Yeah, I'm going to be moving into sponsorships and stuff like that because I want to make this full-time endeavor, I actually want to
right.
make it full-time. I think once I reached that 30,000 subscriber point, I started to realize, hey, this is only going to keep getting bigger. So I might as well keep improving the content and raising the level. And
I can't wait to see it, man. The content so far has been so good. I mean, honestly, I do love your reactions. I check out stuff like even for bands I'm not familiar with. I'll see what you think of it, honestly. And that's it.
cool.
It's so great to be here. But yeah,
Yeah, well, I'm
it's
glad you're here
crazy.
too.
It's
Go ahead.
crazy because you talked about the Deer Hunter. You've done about 3 or 4 reactions to them. You
Yeah,
need to do an album because the fact is
yeah.
every time you stop a track, the one thing you always say is, "Oh, it looks like it's leading into another track." Well,
You're right. You're right. I should. Well,
uh,
what would you recommend?
oh, don't, oh, you're putting pressure on me. Personally, my favorite is Act 4, but if you're more into the sci-fi funky elements, I mean, Antimai as a whole is very good. Antimai is very good.
Okay.
But Act 4 is my favorite, followed by Act 3. Act 3 is a very war album. I guess it depends on your persuasion, like what you're into, because um, Act 4 is orchestral. It's big. There are a lot of big emotions tied into it. Some of their best
Mhm.
guitar work is in it. Um, it's not too hard. Act 3 is a very hard, harsh sounding album, but it's also very, very good. I can't name a
Mhm.
bad album by either one of these
Mhm.
bands
Yeah.
personally.
Well,
Um,
I'm going to do that. I'm going to follow through with that. I'm going to react to a full album. And it just occurred to me too. I've done quite a few full album reacts on the channel. I've been doing all of the Mars Volta, and there's been lots of different bands, but it just reminds me of how I used to get into music, in the late 70s, especially when I started buying albums, got my own record player, and into the 80s and whatnot. And the whole idea was, you get an album and you invest in it more or less. You pay the money for the album, you take it home, and it's like, well, I even if you don't like it the first hearing, it's like, well, I bought it, I got to listen to it again, you know. So there's some of my favorite albums, for example, Alan Parsons' project, I, Robot, or something like that. I didn't like them at first, and then of course after that they became my favorite album of all time at the time, right? So music, really, you have to invest in it. You have to and that's why I like doing the full album reacts. I think it's good for the channel to remind people that it's not just about little slices of songs here and there. You know, there's a bigger concept, there's a bigger whole to look at, and um, yeah, yeah.
They're big on that. I mean, the thing is, imagine, if you will, you start spinning Abbey Road, but halfway into it you hear like the beginnings of Strawberry Fields with different lyrics. That's what it's like to listen to the Deer Hunter and Coheed. They reprise songs from earlier albums because it's an ongoing story.
Hmm.
In Act 1, or in the Deer Hunter Act 4, you get a reprise from Act 2 that is very important. You reacted to it as well, and you're like, oh, this is a very beautiful melody. And me, I'm sitting here, I'm like, that's from Act 2. It's a very important melody, and they do that a lot in Act 5. You get tons and tons of reprises because this is a story that they're trying to tell. Coheed does the same thing in Good Apollo. Towards the end of the album, they completely reprise the song off of In Keeping Secrets. It's they have this way of storytelling where the music itself, people have their own themes, like characters from the story have their own kind of theme songs. It's really important to get all of it. If you had infinite time and infinite videos to make, I'd say do it in order. Do from release order. That's the way to do it. You could really feel how they've progressed, because Coheed's first album and most recent sound nothing alike.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want the real gist of it all, Good Apollo is a great start for Coheed. Act 4 is a fantastic album for the Deer Hunter. And I've interviewed Casey. That man, I will tell you this right now, incredibly humble, fantastic to talk to. I have no bad words to say about it. They say don't meet your heroes, but I would meet him 5 or 6 more times.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's probably what I forgot I was going to ask you about. You actually had them on your podcast, or the one member, right?
Yeah, we had Casey, lead singer and kind of the main concept guy of the Deer Hunter. We talked about, music and relating to the fans, and he's a fantastic interviewee. Really, really, truly.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I hope to, like, as I'm getting more into interviews now, I'm going to start doing this much more regularly. I'm hoping to start getting some bigger names, bands to interview. I'm starting off with basically brand new bands. There's this band down in Australia. I did an interview with them a year ago, and then they have a new album out, so I'm going to interview them again and sort of help promote them a bit. They're kind of like prog metal, and but it sure would be nice someday to start interviewing some of the bigger folks. I wouldn't want to tackle Coheed yet because I don't know enough about them. I'd be embarrassed that I don't know enough about them to talk to them.
Yeah,
but,
we've been dying to get Claudio on our podcast, so we're kind of chopping at the bit for that. But as far as Casey goes from the Deer Hunter, if you ever do want to try to do an interview, the thing I did was I asked him on Twitter, and he said great. Wow. So I know it's insane. Super busy writing a brand new album, and he's just like, "Yeah, I'll do an interview."
That's cool.
Super down to earth.
So tell me just a little bit more about your podcast. We've got let's see, we got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Tell me a little more about your podcast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The All Things Coheed podcast. We basically tackle everything regarding Coheed, whether it be bands that are touring with them. We talk about tour dates, new merch. We try to tackle every aspect to this one band. We catalog the history of what they've released in the past. We talk a lot about the story in an in-depth way, in places that no one else is talking about it. There aren't really any other story-driven podcast for this band, and it's a story that's not very well known, published by Boom Studios, and no one is talking about it. Wonderful story. Mark Wahlberg for some reason bought the movie rights to the Amory Wars and did nothing with it, and they've expired. So it's a big enough IP for something to be done with it. but it's really fun. I love my podcast. Devin is amazing. What a fantastic co-host. Cindy is a former host of ours. Um, but the fact of the matter is that we like engaging the people. If you're a big Coheed fan, come listen to us. We might even have you on. We have fans on all the time just to sit and, like you would back in the day with your friends and be like, I just listened to this album. What did you think? Man, I love this album. Or, this song didn't do it for me, but why? It's just bullshitting
Hmm.
about the thing that you really love. And there's
Hmm.
something really beautiful about that.
Yeah, and there's something about there's a social aspect to music, isn't there? Where you just don't want to be enjoying it yourself. You immediately want to share it. For example, I gave Close to the Edge by Yes to my friend to get them into Prog and Yes when we were like in grade school, and he ended up he literally threw the album against the wall, smashed it up, ripped the cover in 1,000 pieces. He hated it, and then a year later, sudden until this very day, they're him and his brother are both Yes Prog fans. They're big fans, so so you want to kind of spread the message and sort of get other friends to enjoy the music you just because it connects with you at such a deep level, isn't it? That's what it is. It's not there's something it's not like I don't know it's not like you just read a book and put it away and forget about it. There's something that just it captures your imagination, and literally you could spend your whole life just that's your passion is this band and their music. It's just music is so powerful. It's really amazing. Yeah.
I don't think I could have said it better myself. I mean, there's something about the human emotion. We all feel grief, we all feel loss, we can all feel this intense happiness, and their music it kind of binds us all together to say, I'm feeling exactly the same way you're feeling right now, and we're connecting on that emotional level.
Hmm.
And music is, it's the great communicator, right?
Hmm. Hmm. And it's also very interesting now because of the instant communication now we have, even for example this Zoom call we're making across thousands of miles or whatever. I was worried about the future of music, and I was concerned about it. Mainstream music has often been really commercial, and there's always garbage in the mainstream, but there's always some gems that seem to sneak in there, and defy everything else, like some really good music. um, but and also the fact that gaming is such a huge thing. My kids are playing games 10 hours a day, always on the screen, and I was wondering, oh, what's going to happen to music? People are just listening to music as a side interest. They're not really focusing on music. But I think actually this whole YouTube React channel phenomena, which I never really planned to get into this, I think it's actually just the beginning of something. I'm actually starting to think that this is not just a thing. It's kind of a small revolution that's happening where people are discovering music through sharing. Like someone might watch my channel and learn about a new band, and it's sort of like I'm not in the room physically, but we're kind of in the same room mentally, listening to this new music and making a connection. And I think that there's a lot more to this music reacting than we realize. I think music is going to be it's going to be a more important part of our culture again. I think it's a great thing.
Dean, I gotta be honest. It's kind of like, rock mags, like back in the day. You're reading things from people who are, music reviewers, and sometimes you really agree with what they say to the point where you're just like, I can't wait to get this next issue so I can see what they think about this. If I agreed with them so much on this, then I'll definitely agree on the next thing that they come out with. I think it's that culture. It's that kind of react culture where it is literally the rock reviewers, the rock writers. It's essentially what it is. You're sitting
Hmm.
there, you're giving your exact thoughts on the things you just heard. I
Hmm.
mean, it's
Hmm.
this, since been around since like the 70s and 60s, and
Hmm.
ever
Hmm.
since there's music, it's
Hmm.
rock writers.
Hmm. Hmm. So on that note, we're just about to wrap up. Time is almost out. Thank you so much for doing this interview, and I think what you're doing there is really important. I think what I'm doing is really important. It's bigger than us. I think this is actually kind of a new revolution going on. So thank you so much. I hope we'll connect again. I'm sure we will, and maybe do another chat like this in the future. Maybe after I've reacted to a full album.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have me on
Okay.
next time you do the Deer Hunter.
Oh, okay, sure, absolutely. Okay, we'll sign
Thank
off
you.
then for now. Thank you so much.
Take it easy, Dean.
Take it easy. Okay, bye now.